Several days passed in a rush. At any rate, I'm so glad Angelica's all right now.
I'm glad too. Seems she's even well enough to attend choir practice already. And yet, part of me can't help but feel like I stole her best friend, Marple.
She said it in her ordinary, matter-of-fact tone, but I could hear the sadness beneath.
Excuse me, would you pretend you didn't hear that?
As we walked through the halls, we could overhear enthusiastic chatter from the music room. Captain, let's try our parts again, one more time!
All right. Shall we begin with the sopranos, then? It is essential that we have everyone's cooperation in time for the Christmas concert. We can do this now. We'll have to put everything we have into this since Alyssa quit the choir. Let's put our backs into it!
They all seemed full of life, as if they were having great fun.
Oh! I've been meaning to speak with you again.
Angelica had a spring in her step as soon as she ran towards us in the hall.
The two of you will be attending our Christmas concert, won't you?
Of course! I wouldn't miss it for the world.
And Sara, I hope you haven't forgotten that promise we made.
I'm sorry? Promise?
You said you would cook some of your homemade vegetable soup. I've been waiting ever since, but I could only wait so long, you know.
But of course. Soon then.
It appeared that a weight had lifted from Marple's shoulders as she watched Angie return to practice. Oh, how I envy her. She's living out her youth to its fullest and having all kinds of fun with club activities.
Is it difficult for someone of the nobility to participate in club activities?
Unfortunately.
Listen, Emily. There are more ways than one to live life to its fullest. For a start, since it's such a pretty day, what would you say to having a cup of tea whilst we listen to the choir?
Her cheeks flushed as the corners of her mouth curled modestly. Did you bake scones by any chance?
How did you know? I've got jam, cream, and tea. Well?
How could I say no? I'll have one of everything, please. I was reminded of when I had visited Angelica once, alone, since I was worried about her after all that had happened. Marple's name had come up in conversation.
Sara says what comes to mind so directly that many find her to be callous. But she has a keen sense for how others feel, and is equally true to herself. I'm a bit unrefined and insensitive, you know, but Sara's always taken the time to look after me. I know you and Sara will become fast friends. I've not seen her smile the way she was when the two of you had tea together in forever.
She must be so happy to be wearing such a beautiful smile. But can Marple really be so misunderstood? I hadn't intended to let that one slip.
What's that? What's this about misunderstanding me?
That would be a secret. Now, shall we lunch? As I reached for a scone...
Don't!
I felt an iron grip upon my wrist. Marple? Given recent events, my heart gave a bold thump.
Emily, I urge you to wipe your hands with this napkin before eating.
You're always so thorough, aren't you?
I should think so. I learned from my grandmother to always mind my table manners. Keep your hands clean and be certain to finish everything on your plate.
Like before, Marple handed me a petite napkin.
Angie is more engrossed in her club activities than ever. I miss her.
If you miss her, then how would you like to look after me in her place? I'd love to learn all that you've learned. And I should like to keep having tea together with you like this, if it's all right.
Well, I'll give it some thought.
Marple elegantly wiped her hands and reached for a scone. With the case now solved, it was nice to be able to return to daily life again, and through the experience, Marple and I had grown a little closer as well. Aww. I spoke with Pendleton that evening, as I always did. Thank you for dinner. It was very tasty.
My lady, what's gotten into you?
Pendleton possessed a dubious brow as he brought me milk tea.
You declared with gumption that you could eat anything and survive, but here you are behaving true to the definition of elegance. Did you eat something rotten?
I did not. I always behave like this. But I feel I've realized something from what's happened recently. How murder can be motivated even by the most petty of emotions. I thought that I should make a stronger effort to appreciate the meals prepared for me. It's something one normally takes for granted.
Well, well. It appears you realize two things.
More than two! Ever since I've been attending the academy, I've discovered something new each and every day.
That warms my heart to hear. A good thing, too, as my heart was broken utterly upon sending you off.
You? A broken heart? You're being dramatic.
Far from it. I fear I may have understated my grief. Why, on your first day of school, I suffered agony equal to that of hacking away at one's midsection and scraping out all viscera.
I cannot imagine how painful that would be, so understated it will remain. I daintily sipped my milk tea. With that image in my mind. It was the middle of the night, and all of the servants had long gone to sleep. The night was so still that I could hear the owls outside hooting as I sat at my desk. Before me, there were books and my diary. This was my private time, and using it as such had long been a part of my daily routine. Or so was the case until recently, but so much had been happening lately that it had become partially forgotten. Still, now I'd remembered, perhaps I should take some time to myself before calling Pendleton. So, what's it to be this evening? I believe I should write. Yes. Perhaps I should write in my diary. Every day, I attempted to add something new. I flipped to a fresh blank page. Recently, I made a new friend, an absolute darling by the name of Sara Marple.
If you wouldn't mind, would you like to lunch together? Here you are, a tomato and cheese sandwich.
The scones she bakes have such a mouth-watering flavor to them.
Sara says what comes to mind so directly that many find her to be callous. But she has a keen sense for how others feel, and is equally true to herself. I'm a bit unrefined and insensitive, you know, but Sara's always taken the time to look after me. I know you and Sara will become fast friends. I've not seen her smile the way she was when the two of you had tea together in forever.
She plays at being distant, but she's so very kind, and she cares deeply for her friends. There, I thought as I finished. That should be enough. I'm a bit exhausted. Perhaps I should head straight to bed. My eyes absent-mindedly wandered towards a painting. I don't know if I need to... Well, you know what, let's just finish the chapter off. And remind ourselves of some things that we may have forgotten. It was a massive one which hung on the wall of my room. Hello, Mom and Dad. It was the only thing that reminded me what my family was like. My childhood had almost completely faded away by now. Without it, I doubted I could even recollect my parents' faces. This painting was commissioned when I was only 4 years old, the same year that happened. It's such a pleasant, beautiful painting to admire. Every time I set eyes upon it, it helped to convince me a little more that I knew what they were like beyond vague, fading memories. I didn't know the meaning behind it at the time, but now I knew that both of them had had Her Majesty's rings bestowed upon them. The room in the painting was the former living room. It had long since burnt down. The mansion I currently resided in was built to resemble the previous one on the outside, but the inside would never quite be the same. This painting symbolized one of my truest, most precious memories. At the same time, it served as a reminder to never stop seeking my mother and father's murderer. Her Majesty said that she had been helped by my mother, that my mother was a woman who would come to anyone in need. I think such steadfast trust was why she gave the same ring to her that I have now. I became fixed on the ring as I continued to reach further back into my memories. They were vague in many ways, perhaps parts true and others untrue, but who alive can recall their girlhood days with the clarity of the present? Until I was 4 years old, I lived in London with my mother and father. It was a windy night. So windy, in fact, that I could hear it howling from my bed. Very suddenly, I heard a strange sound coming from the next room. I crept outside, opened the door to peek in, and saw everything. Mother and father were still. There, a man pulled a knife from my mother's chest with a wretched squelch. I felt someone grasp my trembling hand. It was Pendleton, who was the family butler even back then. He covered my mouth to keep me from screaming as he carried me out of the mansion. It wasn't long before it caught fire. All the papers the next morning reported them as having burnt to death in the blaze. But I knew. I saw a man. I saw his knife. I absconded to an old house in the countryside. It was thanks to the land, Pendleton's tireless care, and the kindness of our neighbors that my closed heart gradually healed. I would bore a hole at that painting on the wall every single night when I lived there, thinking, why? Why were mother and father gone? Why were they murdered? And every single time I asked myself those things, my desire to go back to London and find the man behind that night grew with a fever. All these thoughts filled me to the point of overflowing as I clung to the pendant my mother bequeathed me upon her death. All right. To be continued. So, with that being said, what is the next thing I'm going to do? We're going to skip Jack's chapter because that's going to be for next time. There are, like, random assorted Marple scenes throughout the coming chapters, but I'm going to skip them. I might pop in briefly during Akachi and Kobayashi's chapter. Just during the class scene, literally for just a few sentences, because I love when Marple calls out Emily as being the one without peer. I think that's a very wholesome moment. So yeah, I think that'll be the next time I see you. So it'll be a few seconds for you and a few minutes for me, but we'll catch up soon, my dudes. Actually, before the whole classroom thing, I had forgotten about this little jealous moment of Marple's on the boat at the beginning of Kobayashi and Akachi's chapter, so let's start here first.
A moment, Holmes.
Yes, Miss Marple. You look less than pleased.
I might suggest that you put your man on a lead.
I don't understand. Has Watson done something untoward?
Indeed, he has. Do you see the way he behaves like his actions are for Emily's benefit? He is being too bold. His back brings to mind watching a big, excitable dog wagging its tail. She clings to him and he makes no effort to hide being charmed. It's an utter lack of discipline on your part.
I take it you bringing this up means you're envious.
Who knows? I'm certainly not happy about it.
Alright. So I thought it was good to start there. Also, here is where we are in the stream of time. Fairly even so far. Nothing with Jack, of course. Our detective rank is atrocious at the moment. Anyway, you guys can keep me company for a little bit until we get to the classroom. And then we'll just do that little scene. And then we'll skip ahead again. And I'm planning on doing part of the Littlest Landlady chapter, because that seems to be another case that Emily and Marple work on together for the most part. And then after that will be the picnic, and then yeah, we should get into her route properly after that. Okay, I need to be careful around here. I think Akachi and Holmes, like, point at each other first, but just in case. Okay, so they're pointing. Okay. We'll just do this very carefully. There we go. This is the one.
And if I may, I think you're all forgetting one sorely important detail.
Marple sharply changed the subject to grab our attention and then announced in a dignified manner. There she goes.
We do have a detective without peer in our class, but it isn't Holmes. It's Emily Whiteley.
What? Wow!
You're right. I did forget.
I think that's basically the extent of it. Marple just disappears after that part. But yeah, anyway, I always liked that part that she's like, excuse me, my girl is amazing, so... Let's see, what else do I need to do in here? I need to write in my diary about Akachi, apparently, again, so... It's right after this chapter that the, Miss Marple chapter begins, so... That's why I'm making you guys spend some time with me for a little bit here. Write in my diary about Akachi. And then I don't remember how Miss Hudson's chapter begins. Okay, I think we're here. If we start at home, we'll skip ahead a little bit till we're at school. I know Watson asked for help. The littlest landlady. Another morning, another clear, cloudless sky. I had no room for complaints as far as the weather was concerned. Okay, we're at home. Let's see. Counterfeits. Okay. We were to meet in Mayfair, London's West End.
Wait for me, Marple! I shall leave you behind if you cannot keep up.
Watson invited us to his and Holmes's flat, and so we decided to walk the way together. Are we still not there? I can't see how those two walk this distance to school every day.
It stimulates the brain and allows us to collect our thoughts, so if anything, Holmes wouldn't mind walking an even longer distance. Although, I have to wonder if there are even enough thoughts in Watson's brain to properly collect.
Dang, I forgot this was the Dunk on Watson chapter. That's rather mean.
Come now, I was only teasing. I'm sure there's more than dust somewhere in there.
I'm certain that was no simple tease. She doesn't like Watson getting all handsy with her girl.
They use this flat as both their living space and office, and by the sounds of it, they pay the rent using the proceeds from their detective work.
It's a wonder they earn enough to be self-sufficient at their age. And to do it all without any women in the house at that. How do they manage the washing and cleaning?
I can't see Holmes in the kitchen, at least. He's more likely to use beakers for testing the blood of corpses than making the tea.
Speaking of... Oh, yes. This one. I wouldn't want to drink any tea made like that.
Oh? Why?
Well, you know... What if the corpse had some kind of infectious disease? You'd need to handle its blood with the utmost care.
A fine point, though I suppose it's not all bad since you'd be boiling it.
Okay, before we continue, I need to flip my page so I know what I'm doing after this. Okay, there we go. Even then, whatever Holmes can do in regards to cooking and cleaning, I should think Watson even less capable. And yet the shirts they wear at school are always nicely pressed. Certainly not the work of a man's.
Their flat is a bit of a special case. It comes with free meals and tea and such from the landlady.
Oh! Now you mention it, I'd heard as much from Watson. What a sweet thing to do for your tenants.
Poor thing. Looking after Holmes must be a nightmare. More of a nightmare than caring for a pet cat, I'd wager.
We continued to chatter away until we finally reached the flat. How many times had I been here now? Ah, right, this made it the 4th, didn't it? I should prefer a carriage for the 5th.
There you are! I was hoping you'd arrive about now. Thanks for dropping by.
We were happy to. I wanted to come and visit again soon, so the timing was just right. Were you off on an errand just now?
I was, but only to the post office to send off a letter. And if you'd ever like to visit, you don't need to wait for an excuse, you know. Coming to see us is reason enough, isn't it?
I suppose you're right. Thank you.
Speaking of, I hope it was alright to call you over like this today.
Very much so.
Besides, you must be rather taken with this lady to seek outside help for whatever dilemma she's in.
I think there's been a misunderstanding. The lady in question is our landlady, and I only thought fellow women would better understand her feelings.
So that's who it is. I did hear she's quite young, but I didn't know she was close to our age.
You did? She is young, that much is true, but... never mind. Step in.
Watson opened the door to allow us inside. Thank you for holding the door. I took one step in and was immediately cut off by someone new. Where have you been, you horrendous nitwit? Nah! There she is. I could scarcely let out a yelp of surprise before a small girl had crashed into me. She had a lovely mint shade to her hair, mostly tucked beneath a yellow bonnet that was fastened with ribbons near both of her ears. How could you leave a girl alone for so long? I was given the worst kind of fright, I'll have you know. The way she clung to me was much like a child cling to their mother. There was no chance to escape or even to step aside. That and her shoulders had the tiniest, most adorable quiver. What gentleman puts a lady through this? A failure of one, that's what! I've been terrified this entire time, just terrified! If I die during this case, I swear to become a ghost whose only desire is to haunt you forever! I suppose the best course of action here is... I like this one. Forgive me. It was never my intention to frighten you, young lady.
What are you doing?
I'm pretending to be an English gentleman. Wait! Who might you be? The girl seemed bewildered from having realized she scolded the wrong person. Or could that perhaps have been the way she always looked? Her eyes, a striking blue, were as large as I'd ever seen and were made more doe-eyed still by tears that sparkled.
She's a schoolmate of mine and Holmes's. I called her here.
It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Emily Whiteley. Emily Whiteley? My! Are you not one of Her Majesty's detectives?
You know of her?
That I do. Only a true lady reads the daily paper, if that's not too brazen to say. Oh, look at me. I didn't intend to greet a guest so roughly. The more her understanding of the situation raveled, the more her emotions unraveled in turn. You'll forgive me, won't you? It's not often one is forced to see me in such a frantic state.
You could do with learning some patience.
I am patient! I am! Unable to cope with the embarrassment, she buried her face in her hands.
All right, Hudson, all right. Put the kettle on, won't you?
Right away! I'll put on the finest tea you've ever had. Do come along in.
Thank you.
Oh! Are you...
I'm Sara Marple, and you're...
Marple intently scrutinized Hudson, who seemed to fidget from nerves the longer upon she was stared.
You're like a little puppy. You're a rather charming landlady, aren't you?
Puppy? I can't say I've been called that before. Regardless, come. I'd love your help with this.
It would be my pleasure.
We made ourselves comfortable as Hudson prepared some tea. Here you are. Ooh, thank you. And for you, Miss Marple.
Thank you.
There.
Ah! Put it down with more care! Gently now!
We both know you'll spill the load of it once you start drinking. All right, then. I ought to introduce myself. I'm the landlady here, Abigail Hudson. Yes, we've heard a lot about you. You cook all the meals here, yes? Mm-hmm. I make every single one for every single tenant. I'm not one to boast, but everyone loves them.
That's what you call boasting.
And not only do I do the cooking out of the goodness of my heart, I do all the washing and cleaning for some hopeless tenants who can't manage it themselves. And would you look at that? We have one shining example right here. He's the one wearing a hat. She pointed at Watson so directly that a shockwave might have flown from it. Neither he nor Holmes do any housework at all. It's unbelievable.
Ugh, must you tell her that?
I only speak the truth. You don't get to deny it. It boggles the brain how two grown men living under one roof can't learn the first thing about washing or cleaning or... I'd say it shows how capable you are even when you look so young. Those aren't things simply anyone can do. Well, I was entrusted with these flats by my aunt, so I want them to be spick and span at all times. She thrust out her chest with pride.
Don't forget, you had something very important you wanted to discuss with them, didn't you?
Yes, you're right. Very important. Her smile vanished and was instantly replaced by a grave frown. Tell us everything. Listen! Something dreadful happened last night. Hudson had a way of jumping from one expression to the next without losing an ounce of sincerity. She was growing increasingly emotional as she explained her predicament. When I returned home at 9, I found my room in a disastrous state. I know I locked the door when I went out, too. Around what time did you leave home? 6 at night. A relative of mine was visiting London, so we went to eat at a place belonging to his friend.
So the crime took place sometime between 6 and 9 in the evening.
I was so frightened I rang Scotland Yard immediately and had them investigate. Fortunately, the master key for everyone's flats was in the safe, so all's well there. No money was taken either. Now, one thing I haven't been able to find since is a very important piece of tableware. It was part of my late grandmother's collection.
They said they'll try looking into it, but the odds of finding it seem to be low.
Do you suspect it was stolen? Yes, and there was something else unusual about that night. The window had clearly been broken into, but the glass fragments that should have been there simply weren't. They were all gone. That is unusual. The window is made from ordinary glass, isn't it? It is, but I can't fathom who else could have taken them. There was not a single fragment among the mess. For what reason would the culprit take broken glass with them?
Oh, on the subject of the glass...
Watson piped in as if he'd been thinking long and hard about something.
That may be missing, but the culprit left something else in its stead. Blood. I suspect they were injured by the shards. There's evidence they made to wipe this blood off the floor as well, so perhaps it was all taken to reduce evidence.
It's possible. Then we're potentially looking for someone with an injured arm or hand.
Where is Holmes, by the way? I half expected the man would come barging in salivating the second he smelt a case.
Oh, that he most certainly would. Is he out for the day?
He's in Edinburgh assisting with one of his dad's cases. My dad's with him also.
Well, that sounds like a right little family outing. Why didn't you join them?
I didn't want to leave the office unmanned, so I asked Holmes if I could stay. Besides, I've had my fill of trips with the four of us when we were children.
Watson's lips curled into a bitter smile at the corners.
That's why I'm all on my own. And I'm sure you agree that this might be a bit much to handle without any additional help. I'd really appreciate it if the two of you were to lend me a hand.
Certainly. Can you tell us more about the item that was stolen, Hudson? Plenty. It's a Regal Dalton plate, for one thing. Quite an old one, too, with a well-loved floral and fruit design. It's in such pristine condition, even Mom said she's rarely seen tableware with colors as pretty.
Which item has more value? The stolen plate or that cup and saucer with the flowers and lemons?
Marple indicated in the direction of another item in Hudson's collection. The plate, of course. Not to devalue them, but the cup and saucer are both false. Look at the mark on the back. I gently turned the saucer upside down. On it was a symbol of a lion standing atop a crown, but instinct grabbed me whilst I observed it. Something wasn't right about this. I turned over another nearby piece of tableware and confirmed my suspicions. There was a striking difference between the two designs. See? They aren't quite the same as this one here. I don't mind it, though. It might not be the real thing, but my mom gave it to me, and my grandmother used to drink from it, so it's real enough to me. I can't rest easy if I don't have it, so I always keep it with me. Hudson. She was right that the marks on the cup and saucer were different to that on the rest of her collection, but this was not the end of my suspicions. Marple, am I correct in thinking the lion is only meant to have one tail?
You are, but this one has two. In fact, everything except the tea set depicts a lion with two tails.
Hudson, may I ask a question about this cup?
Actually, I'd like to ask you something myself first.
Watson quickly led me and Marple outside for some privacy. Is something wrong?
Well, you see...
Something doesn't add up. She's telling us that the stolen plate is genuine.
I can't help but think. I know what's been bothering me. The plate that was stolen is actually a counterfeit. It's the cup and saucer that are genuine Regal Daltons.
That's right, but she's been convinced otherwise ever since she was a child. She doesn't have a clue.
Interesting that the culprit chose to steal the plate in this case.
I have an idea who the thief could be, then. Who could have stolen the plate? It had to be someone close to her. That's why they chose to steal something important to her over something of monetary value.
That's how I see it. A burglar would have targeted something they could sell.
But that begs the question, why steal it at all? If we stayed outside for much longer, Hudson would grow suspicious, so we decided to go back inside. And upon our return, as if it only had just come to her, Marple suddenly began to share an old tale.
I'm reminded of a similar story from my grandmother. The case of the Benjamin family, if you've ever heard of it.
Oh? Do tell.
It happened in her home village of St. Mary Mead. The Benjamin family ran the only shop in the village.
If it was there, then what does this have to do with here? I'm sure she'll get to that. Just keep listening. Oh, all right.
Like this case, tableware had been stolen. It was the culprit who later claimed to have found it before promptly returning it safely to its owner, earning a considerable reward in the process.
So they set the whole thing up for a reward?
That's right. I wouldn't be able to tell the full tale if the truth hadn't come out at some point, of course. They were later ostracized for their actions. The owner of the tableware was a kind soul, however, and they forgave the thief for their crime.
Are you telling us all this because it might be what's happening to me?
It's one option, though it's still too early to say for certain.
We can't yet dismiss that we might be dealing with an honest-to-goodness theft. Wait! I've got a brilliant theory of my own. Will you hear it?
By all means.
The plate that was stolen was a Regal Dalton original and one of the finest in the land. She enthusiastically produced a newspaper and unfolded it over the table. Gentleman thief Lupin Jr. targets another British national treasure. Is being beautiful a crime? His list of stolen antiques says yes.
Isn't that an issue of the London Sport? You're aware of how infamous it is for the rubbish it publishes, I'm sure. I should hope you aren't taking anything it says to heart.
But look! This bit right here! He's even started setting his sights on the treasures lurking in ordinary British homes. Readers beware! This must be it!
Dear. Oh.
Right.
It pains me to say this after the work you've put in, Hudson, but I doubt Lupin Jr. is the culprit.
Agreed. I'd also recommend you stop reading that newspaper immediately. It's for your own good.
But that plate is a national treasure! Why, if I were a gentleman thief, I wouldn't dare turn down a chance to steal it. Perhaps, but he wouldn't make a mess of a young lady's room in the process. That's simply not the way he does things. From what I've observed of his thefts at any rate.
Well, there must be some explanation.
With no defense left for her claim, Hudson grew quiet. This conversation wasn't without its results, at least. We now knew that the best place to start our search would be with the people closest to her. Right. Let's start our investigation. Would it be alright if we borrowed a list of the current tenants?
Of course. I only ask that you keep its contents private.
Not to worry, we will. Hudson went over to the shelf and pulled a handful of documents from it, which he then displayed for our perusal.
You want the current list, which is this one.
Thank you. Oh? What's that one over here? I was drawn not to the one she displayed most prominently, but to a second sheet, one that looked ever so slightly aged compared to the other.
This one? It's the previous tenant list. We used to have 2 more flats filled than we do now.
I see. Might we look at that one as well, as a precaution?
I don't see the harm in it. Mind you, I can't see it being relevant to your investigation.
No reason not to start with the current list as things stand, but better to be thorough.
Ooh, is it time to start questioning people? May I join in?
My, would it do for the landlady to leave the building unattended?
These are special circumstances. And that ring means you would never abandon someone in need, right?
Never ever. Leave the investigation to me.
Then logic dictates you'll need a capable assistant. Holmes has Watson, but you don't have anyone.
An assistant? What a thought. A fine thought, even. It would be wonderful to have someone like Watson helping me.
Yes! You need someone who's considerate, courageous, someone who can make rational decisions when the time calls for it.
Truly, that does sound wonderful, but it would not be easy to find someone like that. There she goes.
It's a good thing you don't have to search then. From now on, I'm your assistant.
Hudson! You can't force her into it!
And why not? I'd give anything to solve this case together.
Maybe so, but you're the client in this case, and it's much too dangerous to be coming with us when we might come across the thief. And what if they were to come back when they see the flat is empty?
We've nothing to fear. Not with you as a wall to shield us from the danger.
A wall? Why not something more like a gallant knight? I'd even settle for something resembling a human. You'll come to my defense, won't you, Emily?
I'd say we're ready as can be. Remember to arrive promptly tomorrow, Watson. We can't do this without you.
Are you ignoring me?
Yes.